What if, right now, the oxygen around you vanished, just for 10 seconds? No warning, no time to react. The air doesn't get thinner, it's just gone. Planes fall from the sky, birds drop mid-flight, steel structures weaken, human skin starts to burn under unfiltered sunlight. And yet, that's just the beginning. You wouldn't even have time to gasp, because there's nothing to breathe. It sounds like science fiction, right? But the science behind this scenario is disturbingly real. In just 10 seconds, the world as we know it would begin to collapse. Not from an explosion or a war, but from a brief, silent absence of the element we take for granted every second of our lives. How would the planet respond? How would you? This is what happens when oxygen disappears. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go. Today, we live in a world that breathes without question. Every second, oxygen flows silently through our atmosphere, powering our lungs, our cities, our machines. It's in the wind brushing past your skin. It's in every breath you've ever taken, so constant, we never even think about it. Oxygen makes up 21% of the air around us. That invisible percentage? It's the backbone of life. Without it, nothing works. Not you, not your car, not the planet as we know it. But here's the strange part. For something so essential, oxygen is shockingly easy to take for granted. We've conquered oceans and reached outer space, built skyscrapers that kiss the clouds. Yet we rarely ask, what if the air simply stopped working? In today's highly industrialized world, oxygen is more than just breathable air. It's fuel. Hospitals rely on it. Aircraft engines depend on it. Steel factories burn with it. Even your phone's battery, indirectly, is tied to the energy systems oxygen helps sustain. And while we've developed breathtaking technologies, AI, quantum computing, genetic editing, none of it can replace the basic elements that nature provides for free. There is no backup system for oxygen, no plan B, no emergency switch. If it disappears, even briefly, the ripple effects would be immediate and brutal. This story isn't just about science, it's about fragility, about how thin the line is between normal and collapse. So before we dive into the moment oxygen vanishes, let's understand just how deeply our world depends on it, and why 10 seconds without it could feel like the end of everything we've ever known. Oxygen wasn't always here. In fact, for nearly half of Earth's history, the atmosphere contained almost none of it. Life began in darkness, primitive, microscopic, and completely anaerobic. Then, around 2.5 billion years ago, something changed. Cyanobacteria, tiny ocean organisms, began releasing oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. At first, the planet reacted violently. Oxygen was toxic to early life forms. It triggered mass extinctions. But over millions of years, it transformed the Earth, turning the sky blue, building the ozone layer, and allowing complex life to evolve. That invisible gas? It became the foundation of everything we are. Fast forward to today, and oxygen feels eternal. We assume it will always be there. But scientists have long warned, it's not invincible. Forests, the Amazon, the oceans, they're not just scenery. They're the lungs of the planet. And those lungs are struggling. Rising CO2 levels, ocean acidification, deforestation, these don't just heat the planet. They weaken Earth's ability to breathe. In 2010, researchers began noticing strange fluctuations in atmospheric oxygen in certain regions, barely detectable, but real. Some chalked it up to natural variation. Others weren't so sure. In 2023, a quiet paper was published, barely noticed by the public. It outlined a theory: a delicate atmospheric threshold exists, and if disrupted by a sudden, extreme solar event, a shift in Earth's magnetic field, or a rare chemical chain reaction, oxygen levels could plummet. Briefly, maybe just for a few seconds, but long enough. Long enough to remind us that nothing in nature is truly permanent, not even the air we breathe. It begins so subtly, most people wouldn't notice. A flicker in the electric grid, a sudden drop in radio signals, a strange silence in animal behavior, birds flying lower, dogs hiding, whales going off course. But scientists, watching the numbers, would see something terrifying. Oxygen sensors, installed in weather satellites and research stations across the globe, would start flashing anomalies. The readings wouldn't make sense at first, small dips in atmospheric O2 concentration, isolated and inconsistent. But then, they sink. Within minutes, every sensor registers a synchronized drop. Oxygen levels falling, not to 15% or even 10%, but zero. For exactly 10 seconds. It doesn't sound like much, 10 seconds. But here's what that actually means. Commercial planes flying at 30,000 feet would lose engine power instantly. In high altitudes, passengers have 15 to 20 seconds of useful consciousness without oxygen, but they wouldn't even get that, because cabin air would vanish. Steel bridges, held together by iron's reaction with oxygen, would weaken microscopically, but measurably. Fires everywhere? Gone. Flames need oxygen to burn. Across hospitals, ventilators and oxygen tanks scream in alarm, then fall silent. And in the ocean, millions of fish begin to surface in confusion, suffocating in water that no longer carries life. People at sea level? Most would survive, but not without a moment of terror. Lungs straining, ears ringing, blood pressure spiking. The brain, starved for air, would panic. This isn't a slow disaster. It's a snap. A 10-second vacuum that reaches everyone. No one is immune. No country is prepared. And the most haunting part? Scientists still don't fully agree on what could cause it, or whether we'd even be able to stop it if it started. Because in a world so complex, so interconnected, sometimes all it takes is 10 seconds to show how fragile we really are. Here's the part no one expects. It wouldn't take the whole planet losing oxygen to create global chaos. In fact, just one layer of Earth's atmosphere losing oxygen, briefly, could trigger the same chain reaction. And it's not just theory. Some physicists believe a solar superstorm, like the one that nearly hit Earth in 2012, could disrupt the ionosphere in ways we don't fully understand. If that layer's delicate oxygen molecules were destabilized, even for seconds, it could send ripples downward, affecting communication, pressure systems, and even how oxygen binds in the lower atmosphere. One researcher from MIT called it a chemical whip effect, a sudden snap in the atmospheric chain. Most governments don't talk about this. It's too rare, too uncertain. But the math checks out. And here's where it gets stranger. Not every part of the planet would be affected equally. Oxygen loss might strike in waves, starting over the Pacific, sweeping across Asia, then Europe, in a rolling blackout of breath. Some people might experience only 5 seconds of absence. Others, 15. And no one would know why. Imagine trying to explain that. Imagine being the scientist who discovered this possibility and was told not to publish. Because yes, there have been reports, buried papers, suppressed data, from observatories that saw anomalies in high-altitude O2 levels, from pilots who reported sudden unconsciousness at cruising altitude, only to wake up seconds later with no memory of what happened. Coincidences? Or something more? What if we've already come close and didn't even know it? What if the only reason we're still breathing is luck? Suddenly, 10 seconds feels like a lifetime, and we're just now realizing how thin the line is between science fiction and scientific fact. Today, some of the most advanced scientific instruments on Earth are pointed not at distant galaxies, but at our own atmosphere. Satellites like NASA's OCO-2 and Japan's GOSAT track oxygen and carbon fluctuations with stunning precision, measuring how our planet breathes in real time. These aren't just weather tools. They're lifelines. High-altitude balloons, LiDAR systems, and quantum gas sensors now monitor minute changes in O2 concentration across the globe. We can detect a shift as small as 0.01%. And yet, even with all this tech, we're still learning. In 2021, a European study revealed oxygen microvoids forming in the upper troposphere, tiny zones where oxygen levels drop unexpectedly, lasting only milliseconds. Scientists don't know what causes them. Could be turbulence. Could be magnetic anomalies. Could be something else entirely. Meanwhile, researchers are racing to simulate oxygen loss events in controlled chambers, testing how the human body and machines respond when the element vanishes. The results are unsettling. Even brief deprivation causes sudden cardiac stress, memory lapses, and microvascular damage in brain tissue. Not minutes, seconds. That's why some institutions are quietly investing in atmospheric stabilization tech, experimental systems that could theoretically inject emergency oxygen into the air over small zones. But these systems are years, maybe decades, from being usable. And they depend on one thing: time. The very thing a 10-second collapse doesn't offer. And so, for now, the world's best minds continue to watch, measure, calculate, and hope. Because what terrifies scientists most isn't just that oxygen might disappear. It's that we might not realize it's gone until it's already too late. The data is coming in, but the questions keep multiplying. Are we standing on the edge of an atmospheric glitch, or are we already falling through it? Not all scientists agree on what's happening. Some argue that oxygen loss is impossible. Earth systems are self-regulating, they say, and no event, no matter how extreme, could erase O2 so suddenly. But others aren't so sure. There's a growing minority, climatologists, atmospheric chemists, even defense analysts, who suggest we've misunderstood the fragility of our environment. One controversial theory claims that decades of geoengineering, from cloud seeding to high-frequency radio testing, may have unintentionally destabilized upper atmospheric chemistry. Tiny changes, barely noticed, accumulating into something irreversible. Another theory focuses on the Earth's magnetic field. It's weakening, shifting. What if a sudden pulse from the sun interacts with that field in just the wrong way? Could it create a chain reaction that temporarily severs the oxygen molecule stability? Some say no. Others say, maybe it already has. Then there's the more radical view, that we triggered this ourselves. That the very technologies meant to protect us, automated climate systems, AI-managed weather grids, orbital energy arrays, are creating feedback loops we no longer understand. In trying to control nature, did we disrupt the very element that makes us human? But the scariest theory isn't about how it happened. It's about why no one is talking about it. Leaked documents, redacted studies, whistleblowers silenced. Could it be that we already experienced micro-events, oxygen flickers, and governments buried the truth to prevent panic? Maybe we're not asking the right questions. Maybe this isn't a warning. Maybe it's a countdown. Progress always casts a shadow. And sometimes, what lies in that shadow is more terrifying than the problem itself. Because if we cause this, directly or indirectly, then the real question isn't, can we stop it? It's, do we deserve to? The 10 seconds came and went, but nothing was the same after. In cities across the globe, people described the same moment. In eerie silence, a tightness in the chest, a sharp drop in pressure, followed by confusion, nausea, fear. Some fainted. Others simply froze. In hospitals, machines blinked off for no clear reason. Pilots reported blackout moments mid-flight. Infants cried in ways doctors had never heard. Fish washed ashore by the thousands. Plants in high-altitude regions began wilting instantly. It was as if the planet hiccuped. Scientists scrambled for answers, but nothing conclusive surfaced. Governments issued vague statements: atmospheric disturbance, solar interference, contained anomaly. But people knew better. Something broke. Or maybe something shifted. And then came the deeper consequences. Researchers began to notice subtle changes in human biology. Blood oxygen absorption rates fluctuated. Some individuals adapted unnaturally fast. A pattern emerged. People living at high altitudes seemed stronger, quicker, more alert. A few even displayed anomalies in brainwave activity. Were we witnessing the early stages of adaptation? Or something else entirely? A new branch of evolutionary theory emerged, whispers of an oxygen-optimized subspecies. Not superhuman, just slightly different. Enough to ask dangerous questions. Had the brief loss of oxygen triggered a change? Was this nature's response, or something we accidentally unlocked? The world's reaction split. Some demanded answers. Others demanded control. Borders tightened. Research was classified. And as trust eroded, a quiet war began, not with weapons, but with information. One side fights to understand. The other, to contain. Because if evolution did just blink and leave something behind, then humanity may no longer be alone at the top. And we might never be again. In the aftermath of a 10-second silence, humanity is left with one question. What now? For all our science, all our progress, we were caught unprepared by the very element we depend on most. It wasn't war. It wasn't invasion. It wasn't even time. It was absence, brief, invisible, absolute. And from that absence emerged something deeper, a mirror. What we saw in that mirror wasn't just our vulnerability, it was our arrogance. Our belief that nature is a machine to be tweaked, that progress is a ladder we climb forever upward. But now, we face a different kind of choice. One that can't be solved with code or capital. We can chase the next breakthrough, or we can pause, rethink, ask, what kind of world are we building if it can be undone in 10 seconds? The possibility of a new evolutionary path fascinates us, but it also divides us. If some adapt, do the rest become obsolete? If oxygen can vanish once, even briefly, can we ever trust it again? And what if the change already began and we missed it? The choice isn't easy. Evolution is never fair. Nature doesn't ask permission, but we do have agency. We can decide whether to weaponize what we've learned or to protect it, to fragment or unify. In that brief moment without oxygen, we were all the same, gasping, fragile, alive. Maybe that's the real message, unity born in silence. A reminder that the systems holding us together, ecological, biological, societal, are not infinite. And now, we must choose. Keep racing forward, eyes closed. Or stop, breathe, and change direction before the air runs out again. Remember the question we asked at the beginning? What if oxygen disappeared, just for 10 seconds? Now you know what that really means. It's not just a weird what if. It's a glimpse into something terrifyingly possible. And maybe, something that's already happened in ways we couldn't see. I'll be honest with you. When I first started researching this topic, I thought it was just an idea, a fun science mystery. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being distant. It became personal. Because the truth is, we build our lives on assumptions. That air will always be there. That earth is stable. That science has answers for everything. But sometimes, the silence says more than the data. Sometimes, the systems we trust most don't even notice when the ground shifts beneath them. So now, I'm wondering, what else could vanish in 10 seconds? Trust? Memory? Connection? What would you miss if it disappeared before you could even name it? These are the kinds of stories that don't leave you with answers. They leave you thinking, wondering if the world around you is more fragile than you were told. And that's okay, because maybe, just maybe, that awareness is what keeps us grounded, what keeps us breathing. If this story made you feel something, fear, wonder, discomfort, curiosity, let me know in the comments. What would you do if the air vanished for 10 seconds and came back just a little different? Because some say it already has. And maybe we're still catching our breath. Hit like, subscribe, and keep your eyes open, because the next time something disappears, you might be the first to notice.